see if we stayed. We did stay on the right side. Good. Excellent. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday. It is a holiday, which is great. I hope everyone had a lovely one and that you have had a relaxing one. And now you're here ready to engage and ready to bring some questions. We are talking tonight with Lincoln Stoller, and we are talking about personal growth, growing up in mental health, along with a wide variety of other things that may or may not come up. So, Lincoln, before we dive in here, thank you so much for taking the time and being willing to spend your Monday evening with us.
Oh, my pleasure. We'll see what happens. Sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
It should be good. So I'll tell you a little bit about Lincoln, and then we'll talk about the question queue and all those kinds of things. So Lincoln Stoller is a clinical counselor, psychotherapist, and neuropsychologist with expertise in sleep, dreams, hypnosis, and brain biofeedback. Born in 1956, he's influenced by civil rights, counterculture, and public education. Growing up in a secular artistic family, Lincoln embraced independence, pursuing mountaineering and solo expeditions in high school even. After earning a PhD in quantum physics, he founded a software company and explored diverse interests from throat singing in Mongolia to shamanism in South America. Later, he trained in hypnotherapy, past life regression, ceremonial psychedelics, and psychotherapy, some of which we talked about just last week on the show. So if you didn't hear that one, make sure you go back and listen to that. Certified as a clinical counselor and neurofeedback therapist, he integrates clients' reasoning, emotions, and nervous systems. Drawing on his diverse experiences as a physicist, mountaineer, software developer, and psychonaut, he continues to explore physics and computational neurology. And if you are interested in connecting with Lincoln anywhere, I've got a few links for you. Let me drop those in the chat. We've got the website, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So feel free, if I can get them to go. There we go. All right, if I can get them to go, we will have all of those links for you right up here. Having a little bit of a challenge on the YouTube side, but if you are here on either Twitch or YouTube today, I'm going to open up a question queue. Feel free to pop your question in there while we are talking. Again, that the topic tonight is all about personal growth, growing up in mental health. We will address it while we are live. We will make sure that we talk through it as thoroughly as possible. We're just going to get going here. So again, Lincoln, thank you for joining. I would love to just start with what inspired you. That's quite a broad ranging journey from quantum physics and now clinical counselor and psychotherapist. So what inspired your journey from kind of start to finish?
I have no idea. I'm just curious, So, how do you know what inspires you except what attracts you? I know when I was young, I was not attracted by much of anything. I was repelled by school, and I didn't have much of a family because my siblings were much older and my parents were. I was an afterthought baby, It's like they'd already moved on. So they weren't too present, and no one else was too present. And, if you go to school and expect to be coddled and understood and have deep personal relationships with your teachers, you don't make friends because they're employees, at least in public school. And when, the bell rings, they go home. So I was frustrated. And the first thing that popped out at me was climbing, because I had a friend that went to outdoor leadership school. He went to Outward Bound, I think, and came back and introduced me to the idea. So I'm growing up in suburban New York, which is pretty far away from anything mountaineering, like mountains. And the whole concept was very strange and exciting and, distant. So I embraced it, and it was possible because there's rock climbing, which is a kind of introductory version of mountaineering. And you can do that in there's rock climbing places all over the country. All you need is a canyon with some decent rock in it. And so that's what we started doing. And you learn camping and hitchhiking and various things, and then you do some stupid stuff, risky. But it's funny, I never did any of that socially risky stuff like drinking or drugs. But I did this climbing stuff, which was risky. and I'm not sure which was stupider, but I really valued it. And it went on for years throughout high school, and we got more and more serious and went farther places and did adventurous things. And then you start meeting interesting people
Mm-hmm.
finally, you know, you get out of the nest, and yeah, it's like being Christopher Columbus. You go to places you've never been, and I liked to go to countries I didn't speak the language, and you sort of wander around, and I think you learn to be maybe courageous because
Mm.
nothing too bad happens. Although, sometimes I remember somebody wanted to punch me through a window once because they were drunk and there was no one else around to punch through a window. And, you get in these situations and whatever. They didn't. And I never hurt myself either, which was pretty good because, a lot of people do get killed climbing.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's a
it's
lot
not
of
a
reasons
safe
to.
sport necessarily.
No, it's not a safe sport. And you have to be careful. So it's like driving really fast without a seatbelt. You have to,
Hmm.
there are safeties, but they're not all that reliable sometimes. So that went on, and then through college. Oh, I don't know. I don't know why I was interested in physics because it seemed solid and like real answers and real questions. And also, I think I had an insecurity complex that was pretty huge, and I wanted to feel, you know, what's the word? Made whole, like smart and
Mm.
um, confident. That's another thing that you're not going to get in school, pretty much, unless you're a real, you know, uh, sort of prodigy of some kind.
Mm.
And I was not. So I grew up with creative parents. They're all artists. And to be creative in the sciences is kind of dangerous, not physically, but academically dangerous. You're not really supposed to be creative unless you're allowed to be.
Yeah.
And so, that went on for a decade. That's when I lived in Texas for 10 years. And I can't say it was a very happy time because I was struggling with the people and not finding my tribe. I've since decided there is no such thing as a tribe. Now, you sound like you have a tribe, but I've never found a tribe.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to give up thinking there is one. But that's another story because a lot of people want a tribe.
Mm.
So then I did, I was never too attracted to psychology because it's so kind of soft. And whenever you try to poke at it, it just kind of, you get your finger coated in marshmallow or something as saccharin.
Uh-huh.
So I never was attracted to it. But I combined my travel and my cultural interests and my sort of interest in strangeness and reality with getting involved in, um, well, curious about religions in other countries and cultures.
Hmm.
And I must say, I had a wonderful experience because my girlfriend in graduate school was an anthropologist, and she got permission to go to Central America to a very remote tribe. And it's hard to get to remote tribes. They don't
Yeah.
want you. The
Right.
government doesn't want
Right.
you. Um, you don't know how to get there. It's not very safe. So she did all the legwork. It took her almost a year to get permission and to get set up to move into the jungle and live with this group of fairly, um, I use the word cautiously, primitive people. They're not primitive people, primitive lifestyle people.
Sure.
And a small village of maybe 30 people. And so I lived there for a month, and it was wonderful because were some of the most capable people I've ever met, right? Because they do everything themselves. There's
Hmm.
nothing there. There's no store within
Yeah. You
30
can't just
miles at
go get
all.
something.
No,
Right.
you can't go nothing. Everything you got to do yourself. And 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 it's just very interesting because we live in this culture where we have fences and we have obligations, we have specialties, and we have money. They don't have any of that stuff.
Hmm.
But at the same time, they're very much regular people. They gossip and they gripe about their neighbors and they deal with their kids and they have accidents and one of the images that I like to tell people is that here I was in the jungles of Panama, covered in my mosquito netting and my bug repellent and my socks tucked into my pants legs and my waterproof boots and my sun hat, and I'm still getting bitten by bugs and chiggers crawling into my belt line. And these people are virtually naked and then nothing bothers them.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing at all. They're like tough as nails. And it was wonderful. Anyway, that kind of started me into, well, I didn't really know it at the time, but how people were thinking. So then I got involved in these ceremonial use of psychedelics because that sounded exciting. And that's mostly in Central America, not Central America, South America.
Mm.
There's a big history in psychoactive plants, and sometimes it was used in North America, like peyote, but it's more commonly used in South America. And it became very interesting. I spent years, bopping around to different ceremonies, some of which were authentic and others were kind of neo-shamanistic. And then somewhere around 2003 or something, I went to a conference on shamanism in Peru where a lot of what do you want to call them, psychologists were there, hooking people up to machines to see what happens when they do psychedelics or meditate or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to learn that, electroencephalograms and brain science. And I'd always been interested in it. I always dabbled in it. But now I started to practice it as a therapist. I learned it and mentored with people who use brain training for therapeutic uses or for as research. And you can imagine that it goes all over the place into psychology and neurology and therapy and pharmaceuticals and stuff like this. And herbalism, I wanted to grow these plants, and I'm not a very good plant grower. I never managed to get very far before I killed the plants. I mean, these are not easy plants.
Yeah.
They grow fine in their own environment, but
it's not a pothos plant that you can stick in a closet.
No, it's not like English ivy or something.
Right.
So I thought very interesting, and so I had a lot of interesting experiences. Kitchen chemistry, trying to extract DMT from acacia bark, and a lot of stupid stuff. I guess I like to do stupid stuff. You're playing with ether. Ether's, I mean, you got to watch out with some of these things. It's explosive.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to use it for certain things. So, and then on top of that, you're trying to deal with plants, and plants are not entirely reliable because this is what I learned. Grasses are very unreliable. They have to be very hardy and robust and ready to germinate with the slightest rainfall. And the chemicals you're going to get out of a grass vary depending on what life cycle it's in.
Yeah.
So I managed to poison myself with extracts from grasses. Yeah, it had the wrong chemicals, or had some other chemical that I didn't know. And but I think, I don't know if you know about the whole story of witches in the Middle Ages, which we don't have a very good take on. They were herbalists and they were healers, and I don't know what else they were, but it was a pretty dangerous profession because they're fooling with very potent plants, and apparently a lot of people, I don't know, died or became ill. So it was interesting I felt a connection to that as I was experimenting with plants and realizing, you got to be careful here.
Yeah.
So I kind of backed off. There are a lot of plants that are like datura, which a beautiful plant that we put in our gardens, is highly toxic, and quite a few others too. So from there, so now we had psychedelics and ceremony and religion and indigenous culture, and started to do brain science. And not being one to ever take the normal path, I then got involved with past life regression. I don't know, it seemed interesting. And that's a whole nother story, but I could just say flat out, I kind of don't like the um the fiction of it.
Mm,
I mean, to me, it's just hypnosis and deep personal work. And
yeah.
some people insist that there's, reincarnation involved, and I say I'm not interested, frankly. And with the past life regression stories I've gotten out of people, there's not much history there. One guy was a bee, another person was a plant, somebody else was a dolphin on another planet. I mean, this is not past life. This is something else.
Yeah.
That's wonderful stuff because it's visceral. It's like a dream. You
It's
know
neat that
how
your brain is making the
impactful,
connection, but that doesn't mean that
you
it's,
and it
yeah.
feels completely real.
Hmm.
And so you can imagine it can be therapeutic. You deal with death, you deal with life, you deal with lots of strange stories. So then from there, so now I got hypnosis on top of the brain science, on top of the ceremony. And then I finally kind of buckled down because I figured if I was going to make a profession of this, somewhere it's got to have some credentials. None of these other things did offer it at the time, though some of them do now. And so I got a clinical counseling degree from a year of, remote schoolwork during
Hmm.
which I was just a bad student. I just would disagree with everything. And I had a lot more experience than people who were teaching anyhow.
Mm.
So, um, yeah, and then here I am now, write a lot of books, write a lot of articles, and as I was saying before we started, now I'm finishing a book on dreaming, which was part of a series that started with a book on sleep and then another book on altered states. This is the third in the series now on dreaming, and I'm trying to make it distinctive and different
Yeah.
because there's a whole field of these books, and I don't want to just repeat the same thing because that's pointless. So, and it's put me in a kind of strange state because when you write a book about dreaming, you've got to do a lot of dreaming. I mean, I don't know if you have to, but I do.
It helps,
So
probably.
I just read that the average person remembers a dream once a week. I remember 3 dreams a day, and
Yeah.
we actually have like 6 a day, but we don't remember most of them. But even if you do remember a dream, you only remember little bits of it
Yep.
because you're actually spending hours dreaming. I mean, it would be kind of interesting if you had the transcript for a night's dream. It would probably blow you away.
Hmm.
How strange and full of horror and terror and obscenity and
Yes.
every emotion that you have managed to repress. And I think that's one of the reasons we don't remember dreams.
Mm.
They can be too intense. They do their work, but you don't need to be witness to it.
Yeah.
So, and this is what I'd like to express in my book somehow. It's like, it's not just a dictionary of symbol to symbol. What does the car mean? What does the boat mean? It's really an exploration into areas of your psyche or soul that you are not comfortable with, um, for the purpose of knowing the territory. If you don't know what's inside you, it's hard to know what to repress and what to express
Yeah.
because you don't know where they lead. So I think dreams are, they say, okay, shut your mind down, and we're now going to go into your psyche, or you're going to go into your own psyche and start exploring the connections that may be dark or frightening or enlightening, although it seems like they're more dark and frightening than enlightening, just judging from the dreams we have. And then you'll forget the whole thing in the morning, but you will have uh, a certain intuitive sense of how you feel, even if you don't remember the dream.
Hmm.
And, that's hard to clarify, but maybe you understand. So that's where I am now, and talking to you, and we're supposed to be talking about mental health, although we don't have to. And yeah, so what's your interest in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's fascinating to me, just the way that people get to where they are, and the way that people, make all these connections and stuff. And it's like you went on quite a wide and varied journey, and now somehow we got connected. It's like that's crazy. Nothing to do with any of that. It's just always fascinating to me how people get to where they are, and the way that their stories kind of unfold. But yeah, that's really cool. All of that is really neat. I would never go rock climbing. But I know a lot of people get a lot of fulfillment out of that. They get a lot of fulfillment out of the connection to what they're doing physically, the connection to their body, the connection to, nature and all of that if you're doing it outside. I've got a friend who does it mostly inside, which is crazy to me that there are facilities where he is that he can just do all this stuff inside.
Well, gymnastic.
Yeah. It's really neat. But to go from that interest in high school and then all the way down to where you are now and writing books about dreaming is just really neat.
Well, one thing we skipped over, which we have in common, is family. There's certainly been, and relationships. That's been very big. And I think it is for everyone. It's really interesting once you become a therapist or a counselor to learn about other people's families, because we often don't share a lot of the details. We don't know the details, and they're complicated, and they're generally private to some degree. And even with your friends, they don't even want to hear it, right? Because oh, we've heard that story before, kind of like, and you have to retell these stories. It's one aspect of human nature to repeat itself, and we kind of condemn it as like a failure of not being creative. But I think part of the reason we repeat things is we try to get it right the next time. And we want to hold on to what we think we did right the last time.
Yeah.
But the truth is that we're not always holding on to the right things, and we're always going to the places. Like I had a client who wanted to get a new relationship, and it turns out that he was an alcoholic. And so he said, "Oh, I found this new woman, and we're getting together, and I found her at the AA meetings." And I said, no, that's not where you want to find it, But so you can see, you build your environment and you find the people in it, and you think that you're expanding, but you may actually be going in a circle. So what are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
That's a question that I ask people, because they come to me with a question that's basically of that nature. We're trying to get somewhere, and we keep finding ourselves back in the same neighborhood. And my role is, I say, I'm not your friend, is not to be supportive or encouraging necessarily, but directive or suggestive.
Yeah.
Or maybe just full of shit. Say the first thing that comes to my mind, because other people are not going to say the first thing that comes to their mind. Maybe for the better, but because you paid me $200, you'll sit there and listen to me say stupid stuff,
right?
And think that I'm wise or something.
Yeah. Do a lot of clients just kind of treat you like you are their friend until you establish that, like, not boundary, I guess, but fact maybe?
Well, it's a funny thing, I'm not your friend, but you say, what does a friend mean, right? It's, for most people, it's like a reciprocal relationship. I'm not in a reciprocal relationship. We are in a dialogue, and there's concern, and there's a certain obligation, but it's not an equal obligation. You're not obliged to support me in the way I'm obliged to support you, and you're not obliged to put up with me in the way I'm obliged to put up with you.
Right.
And I'm trying to actually elicit from you some of your worst character features, because I believe they may be part of your problem.
The things you don't normally want your friends to see and know.
Yeah. Right.
That makes sense.
And it's a double-edged sword, because I'm not immune to your bad behavior.
Yeah.
And I have to kind of fortify myself in some cases, especially with people who are who call themselves mentally ill. Never sure what that really means, but okay. So some people are definitely on the far side of normal, and I don't have any trouble talking to them, but sometimes I have trouble getting a useful response from them.
Yeah.
They can be oppositional, or suspicious, paranoid,
Mm.
stuff like that. And but those are very interesting people. And it's hard to be a good therapist because
Yeah.
you're trying to become obsolete. You're trying to become unnecessary. So when people finally blow you off, like I have one schizophrenic client who doesn't talk to me anymore,
Mm.
and I think it's because she doesn't need me.
Mm.
That's kind of what she said, and that's a good thing,
Yeah.
right? So I should be happy that I've lost that client,
Right.
right? Because
Yep.
that's what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
Set sail and off you go.
Mm-hmm.
But then I never really know for sure because, I do kind of check in. I remember I sent her an email just last week. I said, "Hey, checking in. How are you doing?" And I got this answer that said, "Fine."
Mm.
That was it, But okay, so that's all I can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know how to get in touch with me.
Right.
And so some people get very personal, but it's interesting, it's not like I know people's um, social life. I
Right.
don't. I know their personal life, which is like much deeper than their social life. So I know their hysteria and their phobias and their obsessions and their bad behaviors, and I don't judge it, but I know it, and I don't think other people know it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I hear the stories of families are always strange because there's always sort of routine of what you can say and who you say it to and what you have to put up with. So I hear all this stuff, and every person becomes I would say they're like a constellation in the stars. They're far away, they're kind of sparkling, they're unreachable. It's not just like a short story that you can finish
Mm-hmm.
and go into the next chapter. The more I get to know people, the further away they get, the more complicated, the more uncertain. And maybe that's just the way I work, but I keep telling people, embrace the chaos and the opportunity and the potential for change. I mean, that to me is what the best definition of sanity is: somebody who can engage any opportunity that they want, as opposed to being afraid of certain things
Yeah.
or being sabotaging themselves. If you can rise to your full potential, then you're the most sane that you're going to be. Right? Maybe I shouldn't say right, but that's what I think.
I mean, theoretically, like you can rise to quite a high potential. I guess it depends on what you're holding up as the standard for potential, because you could rise to a high standard of potential and be in some sort of super high position with lots of authority, and maybe that's your highest potential, but could you still have a lot of issues? Yeah.
Well, there's the chaos. Like, go down all the rabbit holes.
Yeah.
You know, not just one. As some people have told me, you got to be careful what ladder you climb because you end up on the top of somebody else's ladder, and you're not going to really be happy that you're there.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So the question is there just one ladder for you to climb to progress, or are there many?
Mm-hmm.
And how much time do you have?
Yeah.
How much money do you have?
Right.
How much space do you have? Uh, and they're all different answers to those questions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, before we get too far down, I want to make sure to read a couple of these comments from the chat. So, Bitemark says the dose makes the poison, so natural substances are tricky, and it still blows my mind that we use oleander as a decorative plant. And I think that's I don't remember who I was talking to about this the other day. We were just talking about oleander and how prevalent it is here. It's everywhere. It's all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
there are books written about this. there are movies about this. And then we have a great question in the chat as well. Bitemark would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
Really, there's only one, and that was Dylan Thomas's Child's Christmas in Wales, which is, I call it a poem. And it's my favorite because it's what my mother would put on the record player for me to go to bed when I was very young,
Mm-hmm.
and I insisted on hearing it every day. And since then, I've read it and studied it and tried to appreciate. So you have to understand that hypnotherapy is very rhythmic and basically poetic. You have to use words and cadences and tempos carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And that poem was an inspiration to me, especially the way Dylan Thomas read it. And other than that, I don't have any because I'm not that interested in the words as much as the cadence and the rhythm.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
My 11-year-old listens to the same audiobook every night. And so he also reads. He reads a lot, actually. He reads a lot of different books. But then whenever he's trying to go to sleep, he wants the same thing as an audiobook. It is.
What is it?
Oh, shoot.
The little
Oh, no, what is it? What? Bubba, what's the name of that book that you listen to every night? What's the name of the book you listen to every night? Something Heroic Climb and Okay, thank you. Itsy Bitsy Spider's Heroic Climb and Other Stories.
Okay.
Which is just an audiobook.
Must be good.
It's just an audiobook, and it's one of those things. He just listens to it whenever he's done reading the book that he's currently reading, and he's ready to go to bed. He puts it on, and that's what he listens to every night. And when I was little, I used to watch The Labyrinth as often as I could, and so it's like we all have these little rituals from when we're kids that it's always
snowing.
Neat to me. It's snowing.
It's snowing.
Wow. Okay. You can go outside for a brief moment, and then you need to go to sleep, for real. I'm excited that you're excited that it's snowing. You can go look at it for a moment, put on shoes. We're in Texas. We don't get snow.
No,
so he's very excited. Hey, turn that light back off, please. All right. He'll go be excited in the snow, and it'll be all good. Yeah, but it's one of those things. We all have little things that we enjoy, and sometimes whenever you're a kid, especially, I think it's maybe expected or maybe just more accepted that it's the same thing over and over every night. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to go check out A Child's Christmas in Wales because that's not one that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, that's great.
But poems are one of those things that, a song is a poem. And there's plenty of those. I love music. So it's definitely one of those things that it's easy to pick a song and call that a poem.
You can get Child's Christmas in Wales on YouTube.
Perfect. There you
find
go.
It for free, yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. Now, I know from our conversation a while back that you also design board games. How did you get into designing board games, and what are you maybe most proud of when it comes to the games you've developed?
That's kind of an odd area. I think the first experience I had was when I was 9 years old. My parents went to France and spent the summer there and had nothing to do, right? What are you going to do? Foreign country. Living in the countryside. And my brother, who came there at one point, the two of us made a board game. It wasn't really a board game. It was mostly like a collaborative effort to make little pieces and ideas. And it was about battling ships, and we made it with plasticine clay and little pieces. And it never went anywhere, and I never thought twice about it. So then after my second marriage fell apart, I wanted to have some social connections. And somehow I thought making board games would be a good thing to do, because then you could get together with people and play these games and talk about it, and it would be creative and so forth. So I started exploring it. And games are actually pretty difficult. They're like short stories, but you can't fail or you lose your audience. Yeah. Nobody's going to play a boring board game. So it's got to have a whole rhythm, and it's got to be interesting. in concept and execution, and it's got to have a pacing, and it's got to have some amount of tension that is appropriate. You know, you don't want to like alienate certain people because they're not smart enough or can't remember enough rules. And of course, you can't have too many rules anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I started playing with this and also recognizing sort of in physics, there's a lot about simulations or models of things, how things work. So you can take problems and gamify them. When I say
Mm-hmm.
gamify, I don't mean just like giving you little gold stars for answering questions. I mean making them into sort of a strategy and a rule set. So one of the games I liked was I got a pilot's license flying soar planes. So I made soar plane flying into a game, and soar plane flying is, I think, very fun. You're flying a plane without an engine, and you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
stay in the air, and you're trying not to hit the ground or hit a tree or hit a mountain. And I made a game that where all the spaces in the games had updrafts and downdrafts, and you had altitude, and you can move forward and lose altitude and try to find the updrafts and race around course. I thought it worked quite well. And another way I took physics and made it into a game. Like you're trying to compete with others for money to try to discover things, and the discoveries in this game was a puzzle. How do you put the puzzle together? Who's the first one to put the puzzle together? And I made little coins and dollar bills, and I put the faces of all my physics professors on them, and I like that too. And then the last game, I'm making a game now, which we might get to, is called Clients and Architects. And it's about the relationship between architects and their clients.
Uh-huh.
So, clients have money and they have a need, and architects have a vision and they want to make a profit. And it's kind of competitive. The architects want the money, the clients want the building. The architect doesn't want to skimp, the client doesn't want to pay. And how do you make that into a game? So I made it into a game. And it's a puzzle game, is what it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
a maze. So these are kind of, I don't know what you want to call them. They're just creative puzzle, and I like creating them more than playing them.
Mm-hmm.
I just find it more interesting. It's like painting. You create the painting, you don't sit there and repaint it over and over again.
Yeah.
Once you've done, it's done, and then you're finished. So I'm going to make a Kickstarter campaign out of this game, and try to do something unusual, which is to sell handcrafted versions of them rather than to try to publish them in large volume. And I don't know if that's ever worked before, so we'll see.
That's neat. So it's funny you're talking about, after your second marriage fell apart. So, after my divorce wasn't final, but I decided that I also wanted to be more social after I had kicked my ex out of the house. And it was one of those things that it was right after COVID also, or right during COVID. And so I found a group who meets up and plays all these different board games. And they would bring all these just games I had never heard of before, that I'm sure a lot of people have heard of. But it was different games every week, and they would get together at the mall, and we all wore masks, and we, kind of sat a little further apart, but you have to sit a little close to play these games because they are, games you got to get around for. So whether it's a board or like, cards or something to lay out in the middle. But I feel like that actually did help with the social aspect that I was wanting at the time. And I love games. I like games and puzzles. My kids and I just played a game not long ago that was a new one to me that they really loved. So, but yeah, it's kind of one of those things that I think that games bring people together a lot more than people give them credit for, especially if it's things like board games that you can do in person, but also online games. I'm a huge proponent for online gaming. I think that it does bring a lot of people together quite a bit.
I'm not sure what to say about it because I think there's a lot of opportunity for sharing, simple sharing, like just being together and, it's not very threatening, right? Because
Yeah.
it's all within the context of the rules, and it should be surprising somewhat. and it's competitive, but it's not hostile.
Mm-hmm.
But the funny thing is, I tried and I continue to try to do outreach to podcasters who uh, address the gaming community to ask them about, you know, the philosophy or the psychology or the physics of gaming, and I've gotten no response at all. So
Interesting.
I kind of think that for most people, gaming is just recreational
Oh yeah,
and
I
not,
think so.
yeah. I'd like to go a little further, but I haven't found anyone who wants to go further.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
you can find your
I was
gaming
going to
group
say,
again.
I can get you probably connected with a couple of folks who are in both the gaming space and the mental health space who
Oh, that'd be good.
probably have people who talk about that kind of thing all the time. So there's
Yeah.
a podcast called Geek Therapy. And if you're not
Uh-huh.
familiar with
Okay.
that, they are all about gaming and pop culture and mental health. And so I can connect you there. And then I don't remember the name of Dr. B's. I'll have to get you connected with him too, though. But
Okay.
there's a couple of folks that come to mind that I think I could get you connected with for sure to kind of go
Well, you
down
can
that
imagine,
road.
like let's make a board game on mental health.
Mm-hmm.
No, now that sounds kind of boring. So let's make it on, a little more crazy, like somewhere between mental health and Dracula or something, because there are all these different kinds of
Yeah.
pathologies, and then you could be like, you wouldn't know that your partner was a psychopath,
Mm-hmm.
and actually there are a number of games. This is one of the game mechanics that's developed recently, where you play the game according to one set of rules until you reach a certain point, and then the rules flip.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is traditionally done is you're collaborative up to a point, and then somebody, you don't know who, becomes the villain
Mm-hmm.
and starts
Or they've been
killing
playing under
everybody.
different rules and no one knew what
Yeah.
rules they were playing under
Mm-hmm.
because they were
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be hiding it. And yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah, those are
it's
interesting.
subtle and cute.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
All
for a
right.
lot
Well,
of
that takes care of
people,
that question.
I think for a lot of
Go
people,
ahead.
gaming is very recreational. But I do think that even if it is just recreational for someone, unless you are playing truly games just by yourself, and then it's just for entertainment or decompression, maybe a little bit. But if you're playing with any other people or you're playing in a community with other people, like we do puzzles on the stream together, I think that's a form of community engagement and just a way to connect with other people. Are you sitting around a table and doing this puzzle with other people? No, but you're working on the same thing. You're posting about the same thing in the Discord or wherever you're connecting with people. You're talking about the same thing. I think that there's a lot of connection that maybe people don't give gaming credit for, that they are
Oh
participating in,
yeah.
whether they recognize it or not.
Well, this is like the whole world of today's juveniles, right? My son lives on Discord
Mm-hmm.
playing games with his friends,
Yeah. Yes.
and
Absolutely.
and my 24-year-old was in the sort of the beginning of that, doing League of Legends and other
Mm-hmm.
multiplayer games. But now it's more than games. It's like you say, it's community.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is.
And I'm not even welcome, and I don't, of course, keep my ear on his door. I just hear him when he's loud and shouting, which is
Mm-hmm.
quite often, in fact. So I appreciate it, but I'm not part of the community.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
what, I'm 60 something and he's 14. So,
Mm-hmm.
the last thing he wants is me to be visible.
Right. Right. Yeah. My
But I
my
appreciate it.
18-year-old every day is in a Discord call with his friends, and they just are talking. Either they're just talking, or they're playing something together, or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's really an interesting way to bring people
Hmm.
together, for sure. Do you have a true crime story that fascinates you?
No, but I'm very interested in psychopaths and
Mm,
serial killers. But not the Hollywood version. I'm interested in the real people. Like,
yeah.
how do they think? Because my second wife, I think, was pathological,
Mm,
and pathologies are they're inscrutable. I mean, they just don't make sense. I mean, maybe that's the definition of them. And I can't figure it out. I can't figure her out. And then when you listen to the people who are convicted psychopaths, it's not clear that that's really a good category. It's like crime. I've known a few criminals, and you think a criminal is somebody who's been convicted of a crime. No, a good criminal is somebody who's never been convicted of a crime. In fact, who no one knows is even a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a successful criminal. And one of the guys who taught me mountaineering, I was told by somebody who should know, but no one else knows, that he was a thief. And that's how he retired to a life of mountaineering, because he carefully, cultivated his earnings. And that's what a good criminal is. Or maybe that doesn't make them a criminal, makes them a good something. I don't know. Because criminal means you have to be a crime. Crime means you have to be convicted. So you could say a good criminal is like an executive. They, test the bounds of what's appropriate and get away with as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're back to games, right? It's like how to bend the rules and how to mislead people. And, a lot of great, I'm not sure if this is true, but the reputation is that a lot of great stockbrokers are good poker players.
Mm.
So, okay, maybe that's true. And I can see that there could be truth there. I don't know. But, if you ask me true crime stories, I'm interested in what people really thought. And
Yeah.
if you listen to some of these psychopaths, well, psychopathology is interesting because it almost defined by being very rational
Mm.
and very reasonable and completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
So, like Edward Kemper was, I forget what he was called, but he said, I was just very interested I was interested in girls and interested in people, and I just wondered what it would be like to have somebody's head on the couch. And it's like, well, that's weird, but then to do it is like unacceptable.
Yeah.
And that's what he would do. So he would chop people up. And he would take a very sort of clinical, intellectual point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he had a whole story of being abused as a child. And
Right.
I don't know what you want to do with that, but it's pretty common, right? Child abuse is very common.
Yeah.
Or if not abuse, you would say
Some sort
child
of
trauma.
trauma. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wherever it comes from. So it's probably true that, well, this I do like to tell my clients that they're crazy and to tell them that that's okay. We're all a little crazy.
Yeah.
And it's probably better that you embrace it than you deny it, because then you can deal with it and see it clearly.
Yeah.
And, even my successful, high performing people have trouble with being impatient and condemning other people. And I say, well, that's crazy. Just why do you care? They say, well, it bothers me because I'm such a high performance, high expectation person, and other people take advantage of me and let me do the hard work and then just sort of ride on my success. And I say, well, hell with it. Why get bent out of shape if that's the way people are going to be? That's not clinically crazy, but it certainly wears you down if it is a constant source of
Mm-hmm.
annoyance. Anyway, that's my answer to true crime stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Bite Mark says completely rational, completely reasonable, and completely unacceptable. Stealing that for my autobiography title. Thanks. I think that'd be a great autobiography title for you, honestly. Yeah, that sounds like a good one. So we've talked about a lot of things in your background. How has all of that shaped your approach to personal growth?
I don't know if you could say it shaped it. I'm kind of amorphous with regard to that.
Mm.
I'm often you'll hear people say, this is one of the typical things you hear, be specialize, find a niche, work your specialty, become known for something. And I hear that occasionally, and I understand it's much easier to market yourself with an easy moniker and an easy identity. But seriously, we know so little about anything that if you're not broadening your understanding, you don't have a hope
Mm,
of getting a lot of opportunities, I think, for growth. You'll be narrow. And there's always this pressure to narrow, to be a specialist, to be, and I don't respect it anymore.
mhm,
To be a physicist or to be a psychologist or to be a neuropsychologist or a painter or somebody who designs games or all these things I do. I it strikes me as awfully boring to be just one of those things. So now I'm writing this book on sleep and I'm listening to these people say, "Oh, I started my interest in sleep as a young person and now I spent the last 50 years talking about dreams." I thought, "Oh my God, what a boring life." 50 years talking about dreams. I can understand integrating that into your life, but just talking about dreams, and so it goes with all these things. If you're not creative, well, here's another example. When I was a teenager, I took classical guitar for 10 years, and it was interesting for many reasons. But after a while, it became boring
Sure.
because, there were technical issues that you could get better at, but still, it was like paint by numbers,
Mhm,
or in this case, notes. And then when you mature, it becomes, be lyrical, be musical, be inspired, but still, like, it wasn't getting me to the point of writing my own compositions.
mm,
So I felt it was not adequate and stopped. And since then, and that was a long time ago, I've always kept music sort of at arm's reach. And I like the keyboard because it's so much easier technically. Guitar and some of these instruments you really have to keep up on, or you
mhm.
lose the facility in your fingers or the calluses in your fingertips or many other things. And it never worked well with rock climbing because,
Ah,
my fingers would get insensitive and torn up climbing, and they had to be the opposite for guitar. So, you'd think that that would be a kind of irrelevant offshoot music. But it's of course not, because hypnotherapy, as I said, is musical and rhythmic and has tone and cadence. It's perhaps more musical than anything else, because once you get somebody hypnotized, it's all about just keeping them in a state of suspended animation.
mhm.
And you do that by just patter. Just you don't want to be. You almost like scat singing. You don't want to have too much sense because then they'll start thinking again.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, they'll have an opinion and they'll wake up. And you don't want that. So you want them to be, and so it's like a lullaby. It becomes a kind of lullaby. And not if everybody falls for it, of course, but it's something, I think it's a great thing to be able to be hypnotized. Just like it's a great thing to be able to go to the theater and have a wonderful experience, or to go to a movie and find yourself moved, which it could be good if it's a good movie. I've recently been talking to people who like to see horror movies, and I don't understand that. I would not. I don't want to be moved by that. But I guess whatever, okay. My son was off to visit family over the Christmas, so I figured I'd better watch some of these movies that he shouldn't see. So I watched some of these suspense movies, and a lot of them were pretty horrible, I thought.
Mhm.
Child torture and awful, just awful stuff. And it really disturbed me. And
Yeah.
it's good to be able to be, I don't know what the word, taken, inspired? No. Um, um, I don't know. To move into an altered state.
Yeah.
But not all altered states are good. So
Mhm.
you have to be discerning. What am I trying to do? Oh, you asked the question of diversity. Okay, so all of these things come together. And I give a lot of, so you say you'd never go climbing. It's not about the climbing, it's about the people you meet.
Yeah.
And that's kind of true in everything. You meet some weird people if you do weird things. And weird people are very interesting. Some are inspiring, some are just cautionary tales. Most of the mountaineering partners that I've known who are dead, they didn't die for foolish reasons. But like you say, it's a dangerous occupation, and there is no in many cases, there is no backstop, there is no net. So if you keep at it long enough, this is why I stopped. If
Yeah.
you keep at it long enough, you're going to draw the short straw sooner or
Yeah.
later. And this happens. But still, it's interesting to be with people who are willing, at least the ones who are knowledgeable and realistic, willing to risk their life for something. That's kind of a great thing, isn't it? Willing to risk your life for some laudable goal, right? Not being a serial killer,
Right.
which is another way of risking your life.
Yeah.
But, to create something, because how much great stuff gets created unless you are committed? I don't think a lot of great stuff is created unless you're committed.
Yeah.
And that's a certain risk. So, it could drive you again to become a specialist because you think that that's going to bring you closer to inspiration. But I haven't found that.
Mm.
In going back to physics, I'm amazed at how closed-minded people are and how short-sighted, uncreative they are. They get stuck as specialists. It doesn't give them freedom to create new ideas. They get stuck in the old ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So, what? This was interesting. And I did and still try to get on podcasts about mountaineering and other extreme sports because I've been there. And I got half of my clients now came from this podcast, and they are climbers, but they're not the climbers that I was. They're recreational climbers.
Mm-hmm.
They enjoy it as gymnastic exercise when they have a chance. And climbing, like, classical music is something you have to keep up on if you want to be good. And who can put all that time? You have to be like a ski bum or a
Yeah.
climbing bum to stay good. Or there are now professional climbers, but not many people can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So these people are my clients, and sometimes I tell them, you need to go climbing this weekend. You need to get out and get away from whatever is bothering you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one of my clients is a pretty extreme climber, and I think he finds it relaxing to hear me give him hell about it, and explain, the point of view of somebody who's, older
Mm-hmm.
and who's graduated perhaps from his level of compulsion.
Yeah.
I think I'm just sort of spinning my gears here. Let's go on to the next question.
Well, I get the advice to specialize all the time myself with just the broadness
Right.
of this podcast. It's one of those things that, and even like in the games that I play, like if you look at streamers who are super popular and really make a lot of money from it, they have one game that they play. They have one thing that they talk about. That's their specialty. And I'm like, that's great for them. I would be bored to tears. And I keep my podcast especially so broad because I am interested to learn about a whole bunch of different things. I don't want to know everything about one thing. I want to know a bunch of stuff about a bunch of things. And it's interesting to hear you say kind of the same thing and just get where you are in life and be like, no, you don't have to specialize. If that's not something that you want to do, you don't have to. It's nice.
There's one of the things that I've become more and more of a racist and what are all these negative words? Profiler and well, I'll tell you what I mean. I've started to recognize that people's culture really affects them.
Mm.
The culture you've grown up in, the culture you're living in. And I've started to recognize, well, if you're a Scandinavian living in a Scandinavian country, or an Italian or a Mediterranean, or a North African, or a Middle Easterner, or a Canadian, or a Central American, or South American, or from Argentina or Chile, there's going to be a certain, or if you're Jewish, or you're Presbyterian, or you're Pentecostal. I mean, all of these things, they kind of bleed into your character if you spend enough time with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I ask my clients, what's your legacy? What is your heritage? What is your culture? Where do you feel comfortable or not comfortable? And sometimes people admit, well, this is typical Jewish thing. There's like the Jewish profile, you know, guilty males. Right? Jewish men always seem to carry a lot of guilt. All right. And sometimes that's funny because if you can see it. And and then, Christians have their attitude. You can say it's hypocritical sometimes, or you can say it's righteous, or you could say it's socially generous. Oh, and then race. I speak to a few black people, not as much as I'd like to, and I tell them I don't know how you can put up with it. I'd go ballistic if I had to live under this uh, shadow of inferiority or lack of opportunity. I'd just go ballistic. I don't know how you can stand it,
Mm.
but they can because they've grown up with it. And we hear these stories now about if you're a young black male and you get pulled over by a policeman, watch out.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be. But I assume that a lot of young black males are taught to, you know, live with it,
Hmm.
be cautious, and be wise. That kind of stuff would drive me nuts.
Yeah.
So and women and men, and then the whole thing about gender identity, and then you start mixing that. Like I very much like this Australian movie called Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which is about cross-dressing men, but from an Australian point of view. Uh, I just like it, especially because the characters who are cross-dressers are all macho actors.
Mm.
So they've flipped the role, and I just find it tremendously amusing to see that. Um, so, so I say racist in the sense that I'm more attentive to race and culture, heritage, and I think it's very interesting, and I think it's useful and important and unavoidable.
Mm.
We are sponges, cultural sponges, and we learn from our parents, unavoidably, and our environment. And so, I was very interested to live in Texas. Texas is a different place culturally, somewhat. I never really lived in the South, but I lived in California and I lived in Texas and I lived in Massachusetts and New York. Pretty much those are the main places. I traveled to, Alaska
Hmm.
and Central America. And I'm always listening to what the culture offers. Um, yeah, so, you could probably tell me things that I don't know. I'm sure you could about the culture that you know about, because I'm not an expert in any of these cultures.
Hmm.
I just I'm a visitor to many of them.
Yeah. I'm definitely glad you clarified what you meant by that because I was about to be like, "Hey, let's end this." But yeah, no, I think the where you grow up, who you grew up around, what you grew up with, yeah, definitely makes a big difference in your own self and kind of that piece of your self identity a little bit and how you get along in the world. I think that does have a big part of it.
Well, it's interesting that you say that you were about to react to my statements, and I say that's very interesting because what does that mean to you? Where do you land? What is your tolerance, expectation? Texas was traditionally a pretty segregated state.
Yes.
At least when I was there in the 70s, there was a black part of town and there was a Mexican part of the town. This was in Austin. And I don't think those parts of town are there anymore, partly because they got gentrified
Mm.
and people had to go move off to Bastrop, or I don't know where they went. Um, but, you could go to the black part of town and be immersed in black Texas culture.
Hmm.
And I don't know because I haven't been back, but I don't think it's going to be that easy to find anymore,
Mm. Yeah.
that segregation. But maybe not. So now I'm in Canada, and it's very interesting because Canada is one of these places where it's truly separate but equal. The Hindus and the Indians and the blacks, although there aren't many, and the central Middle Easterners. All these people are here, but they don't mingle very much,
Mm.
except in Walmart. That's why I like to go to Walmart, because then everybody's there. Um, and they keep to themselves, and that's sort of Canadian. And I don't really like it very much. I much prefer to be in a melting not a melting pot in the sense that everybody loses their identity. That was the original idea of melting pot. But in the melting pot in terms of a melding pot, not a melting pot, a
Get the
melding pot.
exposure to different cultures
Yeah.
and the ability to experience them, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think the gut reaction to someone saying I'm becoming more and more racist is probably one that you're just like, oh, that's not someone that I want to associate with necessarily. But yeah, I mean, the way that you clarified that is quite different than what the
But
gut reaction to that statement is.
I've also found people who are startlingly racist in the hostile sense.
Yeah.
And I'm always surprised when I encounter those people. I mean, I don't know how much of that really persists in Texas, but it does persist in New York State.
Racism? Oh, it's here.
Yeah. I mean, I would expect it.
There's tons of it here still. Believe me.
But it's not. But it's not
it's
like
unfortunate.
Yeah. And it's interesting to. Well, here's a little hot topic. I notice now that my son cannot say the word nigger. It's a hot topic word, right? It's a loaded word, and it has different meanings over time. And I get upset because I don't like to rewrite the language to make it sound better. So I insist that we explore that word. And so there's who am I thinking of? The James Baldwin, is it? Yes, I think, has a movie called I Am Not Your Negro or something like that, where he talks about racism. And God, we saw another movie that really dealt with racism. And I want it to be understood because I think it's a very important aspect, a very unfortunate perhaps, but important aspect of culture. And of course, it's not just racial, it's cultural prejudice. Could be gender, could be age, could be anything, religion, whatever. And so I want it to be seen and understood and dealt with authentically. So you say, how you react to racism. Well, we could get, it gets pretty bad. This actually was a part of my growing up. In the boring years of my youth, where nobody was at home, I would look through my parents' books. And since my father was a photographer, he had books of Matthew Brady's pictures of the Civil War. And they were actually known to be kind of a landmark in bringing the horror of war to people. Because this was taking photographs in the 1860s, right? There weren't that a lot of photographs. And he was out there on the battlefield taking photographs. And people were pretty horrified. And me, at the age of 7 or 8, I was pretty horrified too. And there were other pictures of like lynchings in the South, and it's like stuff you don't even want kids to see.
Right.
I mean, frankly, it's probably as bad as I can imagine. Well, almost as bad as I can imagine. So I was looking at this stuff, and I think it impacted me. And it I guess you could say, sensitized me. In ways, it traumatized me. It traumatized me.
Sure.
And that's part of the reason that I insist on dealing with some of these social negative social stuff, because I don't want to be part of it again. I don't want to let it go by without being noted. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
that was a digression.
Well, listen, we go in different little chases all the time here, so it's fine. But yeah, I mean, there are some things that I would rather my kids not see without me there, or not see without someone who is an expert in that topic there to talk through it. I think it's important for kids to have exposure to some different things that aren't necessarily pleasant. I think that it's important that they don't feel like every day is a perfect sunny rainbow for every person on the planet, because that's just not the case. And there's a lot of things that, they'll say things on the news like, oh, this next segment has such and such in it. Parents, just be aware. And I always am like, great, I'm in the car with you. We're going to listen to it together. I'm not going to turn it off. I'm not going to switch the channel. If you have questions, just ask me. And I think having that as opposed to, oh, my parents have this book and I'm going to look through it on my own without the kind of supervision. I think that exposure is something that I wouldn't want for my kids. Most definitely. I would rather,
my
if
parents
they want
didn't seem to care.
yeah, if they want to go through
Yeah.
something like that, if they want to look at those pictures and learn more about the Civil War or learn more about lynching history and that kind of thing, then I think that that's something that I would support. But I would definitely try to be like, okay, let's sit down and let's go through it.
Another movie you reminded me was called Black Klansman
Mm.
by who's that famous black filmmaker?
Ted Michaels.
No, it's you'll know. Let me just see. Damn. Black Klansman. Tell me who wrote this thing. Spike Lee. Spike Lee.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, Spike Lee is very much in your face, and that movie is full of racism in the old and negative sense.
Mm.
It's about the Ku Klux Klan and the police trying to infiltrate it, and it's fictional, but not entirely. And I wanted to watch that with my son because, like, I wanted him to know what is really the story behind racism, not just what people don't like to talk about today, but So this is very interesting, and you get into the issue of, is it important to learn history? My son hates social studies, and I can't disagree with him. It's one thing to learn it; it's another thing to be tested on it.
Right. I agree.
So yeah,
I agree
it's
with that for
sure. So, anyway, this does get back to therapy because I think a lot of this stuff is buried in people's characters,
Mm-hmm.
and they're dealing with it. They're irritated by it being brought up, or they're feeling challenged. Anyway, let's go on.
Yeah, so I mean, just getting into some of the things that do challenge people, what are some common things that folks might face in their personal development, and how do they come to you with those, and how do you help them overcome those sorts of things?
Well, there's usually a story. People come with their story, and I have to listen to the story. And it usually starts somewhere in the past, and it works its way up, just like my story worked its way up. And then it comes to a logical conclusion, which is like a dead end. It's where they're stuck at. And they're basically trying to say, this is how it came to be, and this is how reasonable and rational it is for me to be stuck here. And, this is what I believe, this is what the truth is, and there's no way forward. Now you help me. And at that point, well, before that point, I've recognized that this story isn't entirely true. It's been edited for my consumption or for their consumption. And I'm trying to see where the holes are in the story. And I'm trying to find where what you might call hooks are, where I could hook into the story. So typical things like family. We could talk about family. We could talk about marriages. We could talk about kids. We could talk about our childhood. We could talk about our businesses, our schooling, our health. And, I have something to say in any of those areas. And unlike other therapists, because therapy is kind of a specialty and you're trained to do certain things, and one of the things you're trained to do is not to share very much. I don't agree with that. I'll share anything. But I'm sharing it for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sharing it with a kind of a goal in mind, hopefully to get more on your page or to get you more on my page. So the typical things people have are, frustrations, um, things that people want that they haven't been able to get, or things that they got that they didn't want, like ill health or misfortune, as in trauma. And sometimes people don't know what their problem is. They're just angry, or they're frustrated, or they're frightened. And before I was involved in therapy as a therapist, I thought that therapy was for people who are lacking, needy,
Mm.
um, disabled. And I guess, there's some place for that. But mostly I find therapy, at least the people who I work with, is for people who are trying to move up and through and out of something or beyond something. And they're usually motivated, not always as smart as I think they should be. Sometimes they're fooling themselves or sabotaging themselves. But most of the time, they aren't um, lacking in any way. And quite a few of the people who've been my clients have not been my clients for long. And I consider that a good thing. Like I mentioned, you never quite know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they didn't get along with me and they found, I had one client who said, "Oh, I found going to work with somebody else. And he said, they're free." And I said, "Well, great. You've made a decision. That's what you need to do. Make more decisions."
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I don't think going for somebody who's free is going to get you a great value, especially in therapy where experience is everything. But okay, fine. And I haven't heard from him again. He was a difficult guy. I never really liked talking to him anyhow. It's very oppositional. And that was his thing. Being a He was a problem for everybody. So I'm supposed to get paid and take it. But I'm only human. So
Right.
right. And it's sort of like when I talk to people, I try to turn them in the direction they want to go. But they're often very sticky and they go back to their old attitude. So
Right.
this guy was oppositional. He'd go back to being oppositional. Um, and whatever, if you have a problem, you'll go back to your problem. If you're unhappy with your relationship, I'll try to put a new idea in front of you and invite you to consider alternatives. But it'd be pretty standard for you to come back to work on your point of view again.
Yeah.
And okay, I mean, I understand it because there's more to your point of view than you even know. It's built on all sorts of legacy and memories and associations, only a few of which we've even bothered to talk about yet.
Right.
And I would, it's kind of a process of digging. You might even use the metaphor of digging people out of their hole. Um, yeah, sort of. I think that's a pretty good metaphor. I think about it myself. I'm in certain holes. So, I've always been interested in certain problems in physics. This is an interesting example because, that's very self-inflicted. If I want to be obsessed about some technical problem, that's my problem. I'm doing that. It's hardly personal,
Mm-hmm.
but I take it personally. And then I say, "Well, I'm not smart enough to answer this," or, maybe this actually has helped to tell you the truth. I felt recently I am smart enough to answer this. And that's actually been kind of transformational to me because a lot of people throughout my career have been telling me I was not. And it kind of stuck after a while, kind of infiltrated my psyche. And so now I feel kind of liberated. And I can just write a book by getting a blank piece of paper and just starting to write
Mm-hmm.
and figuring, well, I usually have good ideas and something good will come of this. I don't have to know that I have to hit a target. I'm just creative. So it's like a painter. If you're a good painter, you just paint.
Mm-hmm.
You don't worry about whether this is good enough. I mean, maybe you throw out 90% of what you do, but still, you don't doubt you have something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's helped me. The science has helped me
Yeah.
recognize that. And so also has the therapy helping people, even if I don't know whether I've helped them. I do get clients who give me great, you know, uh, credit, and they tell me, don't be an asshole, accept the gratitude
Yeah.
and the endorsement, and say thank you, and don't say, oh shucks, I didn't do anything, even if I don't think I did do anything.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how it works.
Yeah. So,
It's very kind of paradoxical.
right. So most of the people who come to you, they come to you with a specific problem. Do you think that there's any trick to recognizing when you're stuck in life and deciding to do something about it? Or is it just like you're going to get there at some point and you're going to be there and then you're going to either seek out some help and support or you're not? Is there anything that's like super common when people realize that?
Well, there's all these things in our culture to help us, all these palliatives, help us avoid feeling stuck, all
Mm-hmm.
these entertainments and all these excuses. And our material lifestyle, just go out and buy another suit or see another movie or all these recreations that are basically designed to keep us satisfied and fat and happy and stupid. And I understand that. People want that. People like it. I think a lot of people manage to avoid their problems.
Mm.
And as a result, they don't grow and they don't fulfill their potential. And I also look at this intergenerationally. It's like you are who your lineage has made you to be.
Mm.
So your parents contributed to it. So did your grandparents and their parents. And again, your culture and where you grew up and the attitudes that prevail. And all of this has flaws. And you are now the representative of this lineage. Now, what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to seek comfort and stasis? Uh, I had a client today who said, I'm a really great mother and a great grandmother. And I said to her, well, I think that's kind of self deprecating. It's like, no, you're not a great mother or a great grandmother. You're actually a valuable person. It's not who other people have defined you to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't be stuck in playing the role that other people want to applaud. If you want to be a bad mother or a bad grandmother, you should be able to if you feel that's appropriate. Maybe, to take the example, maybe there's racist attitudes in your family and you want to stop them. Well, you're not going to get a lot of support.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are you going to do? And maybe, you get to the age of retirement where you're supposed to be secure and satisfied, and I don't know what you're supposed to be. Maybe that's actually the opportunity to be dissatisfied
Mm.
and to go off and do something that you couldn't have done before. So, um, your question was being stuck. I am a kind of person who endorses not being stuck.
Mm.
But what does it mean to not be stuck? Does it mean that you know exactly where you want to go? No, not usually. Being unstuck usually means release from the structure that you've been in. And yeah, it would be nice if being unstuck means, oh, now I can take up painting or music or travel. But more likely and more usefully, it will be to go in a direction that you don't understand. So I have a guy I worked with as a computer consultant. I don't know if you mentioned I was, had a computer company for 20 years. I think I mentioned it, but it didn't come up. But I learned a lot from business, right? Dealing with people in different attitudes and roles, obligations. And this colleague was he was part of the military group, the group I found myself among, and learned to respect quite a lot for its integrity. But he wasn't that creative. And had this idea that he was going to retire and travel. Okay, but I always got the feeling that he didn't know what he was traveling for. So he'd go all these places, go to Antarctica, go to, the desert and stuff. And he'd send me back pictures of, here's me and my wife in the desert. Here's me and my wife in Antarctica. It's like, yeah, but it's still you. And you're still the same person. And you haven't really got unstuck. And so I didn't feel I could say anything because he didn't ask me. That's part of being a therapist, is you can only say what you're asked to say. You could kind of intimate that maybe there's another frontier for you to explore, but you're not selling, tickets. So, it's like I said, you're looking for hooks. Where are you actually being asked to contribute? So, one of the things that gets people unstuck, unfortunately, is ill health.
Mm.
You get these stories of cancer survivors who say it's the best thing that ever happened to me. That's like incomprehensible, but that's what they feel. And you could say, well, how about death? We're all going to face that. Are you going to be able to say that's the best thing that ever happened to me? Now, that would be a stretch, wouldn't it? But maybe it's not a bad idea because what are you going to do when you get there?
Mm-hmm.
And I do have some clients who are depressed, and they say it's partly because of, dealing with their old age and mortality. But then, is it really? Or is it just that they were always depressed? I don't know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you've had a few experiences with wonderful elders who really were both inspiring and, unburdened with their mortality. I mean, we hear about some of these people, the kind of Mahatma Gandhis of the world, but we rarely meet them. I only know of two people like that. These are people who died singing, died in joy. I'd like to do that too. It's hard to imagine,
Mm-hmm.
but okay. I mean, that's sort of you can be stuck in being mortal and being afraid of death. All the more so if you've got a terminal diagnosis. But even without the terminal, I mean, all of our diagnosis is terminal eventually. So, I think about this quite often. How am I going to engineer my death so that I'm satisfied? I mean, why not think about it? I mean, what are you going to do? Just like walk off the end of the plank, thinking, what? I mean, this is kind of what religion helps people with, and say, well, you're going to go to heaven. Don't worry about it. Well, I don't really buy that. I mean, maybe that'd be nice, but I'm not going to plan for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to plan to be fulfilled now. And it's interesting because, I'm very scientific and rational and completely secular. And in spite of the fact that I've been in contact with many religions and religious people, I'm not religious myself. But my son is. He's fundamentalist, Pentecostal, mostly because his mother is.
Okay.
And
All
you
right.
gotta do what your mother wants. And I'm not quite sure he's gonna stay that way. And I kid him a lot, maybe more than I should. He goes to church, and it's every Sunday, and I say, say hello to Jesus for me. And I'm obviously being annoying. And it's not like there's nothing I mean, Jesus was an inspiring and inspired guy, but Christianity and religion serve a different purpose. They serve a social purpose and a personal purpose, and they can get hypocritical and they can be avoidant sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to be aware of that
Yeah.
in order to do good work. Anyway, that's kind of a funny way to end the answer, but that was kind of my answer of how do I get people unstuck.
Yeah.
I mean, you said, what should you do? What should they do about it? Well, I don't know. I'm not here to tell people what they should do about it.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So my grandfather was a preacher. He was also a funeral director. And when he died, he had a cancer diagnosis and went through a lot in his end days. a lot of it was very focused on religion still for him. And it was like, I've prepared for this. And it brought him a lot of comfort. And it's interesting to me, I'm not religious anymore, for a variety of reasons. And so my kids aren't really religious either. My oldest, his father is very religious, and their whole family goes to church all the time. And then my youngest, his father is not really religious. He's Catholic technically, but very holidays, very holidays Catholic. And so it's one of those things that my youngest, Texas, just passed a law where something about Bible teaching in schools and all this stuff. And so I'm sitting here thinking, how is my 11, obviously my 18-year-old's not going to deal with that, right? He's about to graduate this year, not worried about it. How's my 11-year-old going to handle that whenever he is in school and they're teaching from the Bible and all this stuff, whatever that winds up looking like? We don't know yet. And then I go back to always just his line of questioning that I know he will bring. He's a questioner. He's always asked why. He's always been like, okay, but what about insert this something that he's learned in the previous class? And so I think for a lot of people, religion does bring that comfort to them. And then for a lot of people, it just doesn't, because they're going very similar to what I think. And it sounds like very similar to what you think, like, or you could just live this life or you could just worry about this life, or you could just figure out what you want to do in this life. And it's a different viewpoint, I think, whenever you come to thinking about your mortality and death. And if you're feeling stuck, can you just put it on faith and say, well, that's for God to figure out? Or is it something that you want to figure out how to do something for yourself and how to take that next step for yourself? And that's up to each person to answer. Like, you can't answer that for them. They're not going to get that answer from a podcast. They all have to decide that themselves.
You see it everywhere, I think. I saw it in physics. We're talking about people's attitudes and people's biases. I was going to say prejudice, but I want a little different word there. So in physics, I found you could always ask why to whatever answer you were given, right? Well, you could probably apply that to anything. But in physics, it's almost expected that you'll ask why, but not too much. It's like 2 whys are okay. Like, how do I, why do I use this integral? Oh, you use the integral because this is the situation where it works. And then you say, well, why is this situation where it works? I say, well, because the laws of electromagnetism apply to this. And then you might say, well, why do the laws of electromagnetism? And at that point they say, well, now, this is just how it is. And I always found myself, 3 whys, that was too much. Mm-hmm. 3 whys gets you the point. And I would actually I was thrown out of some classes. I was told to leave because I asked too many whys.
Too many whys.
And I mean, so this is very interesting. It's like, I thought I was supposed to ask why. Well, no, you're not actually. You're supposed to learn why. Mm-hmm. So, and this would apply to religion too. And maybe religion doesn't only allows for 1 why. Or maybe Buddhism allows for 2 whys, and then some nature worship allows for more whys. And then mountaineering was interesting because you could ask why, and you'd say because otherwise you're going to get killed. That would be the answer, right? Yeah. So I liked that. I said, solid answer here. And you can imagine it if you're climbing, and it's dangerous, and you have a rope. And you're trying to use the rope to protect yourself. Every time you use the rope to protect yourself, you have to ask, am I doing it right? Because you can't do it very wrong without the consequence. And the consequence could be grave, so you always try to do your best. I like that. I like the consequence. I like the solidity of truth and consequences. Well, I don't know if it was true, but certainly were the consequences. And I like that about science, although as I say, I found that you weren't all that welcome to ask too many questions. But of course, the good scientists, as the good people in all fields, do go beyond the accepted limit. And so the same thing would be with therapy. It's like, you may not want to ask too many why questions about, like, why is my marriage not working? Or why am I having trouble with my kids? Or why does my mother always treat me like this? But I will ask them.
Mm-hmm.
And I will try to ask it in a way that's a little more supportive than you might ask it of yourself.
Yeah.
Because you'll say, oh, my mother treats me like shit because I'm a lousy person. And I don't want to go there, so I don't want to ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
And if I did ask my mother the question, she'd kind of intimate that was the answer, because again, like, are our parents really qualified for parenthood? No, not really. They just kind of fell into it. I can't think of anybody who trained for parenthood.
Right.
Except, in some cultures, they do train you,
Mm.
right? This was one of the things I learned from indigenous cultures, that, yeah, there are elders who can tell you how to behave, and neighbors who will take care of your kids.
Mm.
Whereas in our culture, sort of the nuclear family, it's like, good luck,
Yeah.
hope it works out for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can come to a therapist when it doesn't.
Right.
But then who can afford that,
Yeah.
I have a client who says, I don't believe I should pay you. Therapy should be free. And I said, absolutely. It should be part of our culture. You shouldn't need to pay for somebody to tell you how to live well.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, I charge.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, everybody's got to make a living. So there's a lot of different ways that people will get to therapy. There's a lot of different things that will bring them to therapy. Is there one way to define success in the context of personal growth? After they're at therapy, how do you say, okay, good, you've made progress?
I don't think I can say that.
Mm.
I think you have to say that. I mean, I can say it, but it's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I compare myself to a horse, and you are riding on the buggy. I pull forward, and I do have the discernment of not walking off a cliff. So you may tell me, the horse, to walk off a cliff, but I won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I will follow the road, and I will pull forward, and it's up to you to be happy with where we've gotten to. There are some places I won't go, like over the cliff. And it's also interesting in some of these past life regression things. Very interesting, very interesting. People, not unusually, I wouldn't say it's common, but not all that uncommon, that people would find themselves in these past life stories, call them whatever you will, of about to be traumatized, raped, murdered, or something else. And it was sort of my job to say, I think we'll just skip past that one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very interesting. Like, why would you want to go there? Or why would you find yourself going there? And are you really ready to go there? So, maybe that's where personal growth needed to go. But if I don't feel comfortable taking you there, as the horse, I'm not going to go there. On the other hand, maybe you were. Maybe it's something that's come up, and maybe you're fortified, and maybe you have allies or angels or something, and we could go there. And we might. One of the goals of this technique, the past life regression, is to get to death.
Mm.
And now to imagine death. That's the end of your life. Okay. Well, a question comes up. Have you lived well? And it's not have you lived well in this life, it's have you lived well in your imagined life. It's an easier question. But it doesn't have much of an easier answer. So, but it's approachable. And then to go beyond that, like, what happens after death? Well, I don't know. Well, make it up. Well, what do you think? And you say, well, that's ridiculous. And it is ridiculous. But it doesn't mean it's not meaningful. Because, again, you're in a sort of hypnotized state where things have a great deal of meaning. And maybe you're going to meet your dead parents. I mean, I dream about my dead parents all the time.
Mm.
I think I have a pretty good relationship with them now, which I was never, at least with my mother, able to achieve. Not that she was bad, it's just that she was inaccessible. So now I have conversations with her as if she's a normal person, and I value those. I don't think I'd have those if she was still alive.
Yeah.
But your question was, how do you measure personal growth, or how do you put a value on it, evaluate it? And I don't think it's a simple answer because there isn't one direction
Right.
called up. A lot of directions are sideways.
Mm-hmm.
It's like fracting for, oil. It's like some of these fractures go sideways and they lead to areas that you might not know about. Maybe things that actually you've forgotten about or didn't know about. Let's see I have a client who said that they learned when they did a genetic test that they were not related to their brother.
Oh.
And that opened up a whole can of worms. Like, well, what was going on here? and members of their family were not all that happy to hear about this. So you might have thought you had one problem, and now unexpectedly you might have a different one.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not be as simple as just finding a pat answer.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to say, but you follow it. There's the old adage, follow the pain. That's always good. If it hurts, it's probably worth
Exploring at least.
finding out why.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another question like, do you really want to be too sensitive? Or can you become too sensitive?
Mm-hmm.
Too empathetic? So like we look at these pictures of the Palestinians in Gaza, and it's like unfathomable to me. I mean, people walking through total devastation. And it's like, how do you deal with that even just as a witness? And we're not even a witness. We're just looking at photographs. I mean, to be there, imagine being there. I mean, that's about as horrible as yet here people are living with families and kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe, get political now. What have we done to make that happen? Or what have we done to prevent it from happening? And how much are you willing to think about it? And how much resources do you have to devote to this? I think most people would say next to none. I'm already full up with my own life, and I don't feel like I can do anything. Maybe when I was a kid, I would have it was the Vietnam War, and I had neighbors who were activists, and we went to these Washington D.C. demonstrations and got tear gassed and stuff, and I was only like 7 or something, and it was kind of an education. It was a little crazy, but at least you'd see people trying to do something. And I would go canvass the neighborhood for signatures, and people they'd be shocked at a little 7-year-old collecting signatures against the war. I don't know. It was an interesting thing to do. I think it was progressive for me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think it contributed to my personal development. Maybe it contributed to other people's too. I don't know. And there's some funny stories about bad things I did, being a truant and a vandal and stuff like that stick in my mind. In a sense, those things were good too. I didn't end up hurting anybody, but I could have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to know what personal growth is going to be the result of.
Yeah. And you don't always necessarily recognize it yourself either as growth. You think it's easier for someone outside looking in to recognize it as growth sometimes than yourself?
I'm not sure if it's relevant if somebody from the outside has an opinion. Who cares? I mean, do you care?
Some people care a lot.
Should you care? They do, but should they? I
Huh?
mean, is like celebrity? Are you successful? Are you recognized? Do you care?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had a graduate professor who said, "You can't be my student. You're not smart enough." And I thought about that for a long time. Am I not smart enough for him? Am I not smart enough for anyone? Am I not smart enough to succeed in this field? What does that mean? I don't think he was too sensitive, but he was honest, at least. I gave him a lot of credit, and he was also a very good physicist.
Mm.
Um, but should I care? I found that in almost every case, I feel like I graduated from a situation when I finally overcame it. So usually when I get thrown out of class, then I realize I've gone beyond what that class offers.
Mm.
And that's usually a good thing. I mean, if I've done it intelligently.
Right.
Um, and so it's like you never finish. And I think that's true. You don't ever finish growing. There's too much to grow into. In the sense, you have all your legacy to repair
Mm.
if you had the time to do it, and you don't.
Right.
So you have to choose what you're going to do and what you're going to leave for other people. Because another thing that I emphasize is that when you lift yourself up, you do lift up the people around you.
Mm.
And that's a very laudable thing to do. Even if you can't appreciate it, it's a great thing to do if you can afford it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Mentally.
So if someone is like, okay, I'm gonna make the time to start on my personal growth journey, where do you start? How do you start if you want to focus on personal growth? What's something you can do to start?
I think the main rule is just to do. You got to do something. You've got to get off whatever tuffet you're sitting on and explore something. Um, and be discerning. Don't do anything that's boring and repetitive and gets you nowhere. Um, so that often means taking a risk, either in how you present yourself or what you invest in. And it usually means failure. Most new ideas fail. That's how they develop. Thomas Edison says, "I failed my way to success." And it's true. If you have the newer your idea, the more farther you're reaching, the more likely that you're not going to succeed on the first try. And that's got to be not only okay, but you've got to want to do that. In computer programming, they say fail fast and fail often.
Mm.
Okay, take that as a personal motto. And what's it mean? Well, does it mean offend people quickly and move on? Or does it mean burn bridges and build new ones? Well, personally, I personally try not to throw anything away that has value. And yes, to throw anything away that has no value, which is hard, especially if you're invested in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, all the ex-wives, the two of them, are deeply entrenched in my psyche,
Mm.
and I would love them both to be back in the fold. And I think it's a good thing for me to want that, but I don't expect them to come back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe they will. If they get their shit together, I think they would. Because then it's like, okay, now everyone's dead and we're floating around in space as spirits. Why are we holding grudges anymore?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I say this to my clients, especially the ones who finally separated or who've gotten to a sort of a terminal point where they've burned a bridge or felt a dislocation. I say to them, now, now you really have a relationship that will last for the rest of your life. The one that you've burned
Mm-hmm.
or that you feel has burned is now like, you know, imprinted onto your psyche,
Yeah.
like a what do you call those things for you?
Like a brand.
A brand. That's right. It's not branded onto you. Um, those things are valuable. They're unfinished business. And if you don't finish them, then somebody else in some way or fashion is going to have to finish it, like your children.
Mm.
So I'm very concerned about the model I play, the role model I am, and try to be careful about what I say, not to be too accepting, not to be too irritating. Um, and in a sense, as a therapist, I'm playing a kind of parental role
Mm.
again, not in the same way
Sure.
as a elder, although sometimes, I mean, literally, sometimes I have kids, but they're almost the easiest to work with because it's like, well, we don't talk about problems. The kids I've worked with, we don't talk about their problems. Their parents say, "Oh, we've got family problems. He never talks to his father, or he's, treated badly." And I get with these kids, and we just talk about anything, and we don't talk about their problems. They don't want to talk about their problems,
Mm-hmm.
but they're happy to talk to somebody who doesn't feel they need help.
Yeah.
So you could have, again, it's the horse metaphor. It's like, what road are you on? Whatever road you're on, I come and attach myself to your wagon and pull you forward. I mean, it's not me to tell you that you're on the wrong road or that this road leads nowhere, though it may. But, and I would say that in our modern culture, a lot of our roads do lead not to where we would like them to lead. They lead to kind of, I wouldn't say dead ends, because there's no really such thing as a dead end,
But
unless you're
maybe
dead,
not
maybe.
where
But
we intended them to go. Not where we thought they were going.
but that yeah, but that may be exactly where you need to go.
Yeah.
Is like the dead end, because now it's like, okay, you've got your house and your lawn and your mortgage. Are you happy? Uh, and the answer might be no, but I don't know what to do about it. I'm supposed to be happy. So
Checked all the
great,
things off my list.
right? And now you know exactly what is not going to make you happy.
Mm.
So don't spend any more time. Don't buy another house. I have one client now who's bought another house, and he thinks it's going to be better now. And now he's going to have a family, and he's going to raise kids. And I say, great, but you'd better be ready for some new problems when you become a father, because it's not investment banking anymore.
Yeah.
But okay, that's where he is. I mean, he's a smart guy. He's always prevailed in the past. I'm sure he'll climb that wall when he gets to it, I hope.
Yeah.
And part of my role is to make that terrain clear, so that I tell him, talk to your wife about things that aren't problems yet. How you spend your time, whether you listen to each other, whether you can listen to each other, whether they're frustrated because you're too busy at work. Because later, when somebody's feeling overburdened and you're too busy at work, things are going to go south.
Yeah.
Pretty fast if you're not on top of things. So part of my, I'm the wise horse. I'm not just pulling you toward your, the end of your road, but I'm trying to alert you to the alternatives along the way.
Yeah. Well, we've got a couple more questions. The first one is one of our fun ones, and that is, what is your favorite life hack? What is your favorite life hack?
I don't know. What's a life hack?
It could be anything. I mean, it could be, attaching something brightly colored to your luggage, or something more fun, like use the Finch app is one we've been talking about a lot lately, which is a mental health app. or something that helps you focus, or some specific technique that you like to use for yourself to help manage your day, or anything that you're like, I don't know
Well,
why more people don't do this.
yeah, I have a lot of projects. The downside is that sometimes they all crest at the same time
Mm,
and feel overwhelming, which is sort of what's happening with this book. And now all of a sudden I have a dozen books that need to be read by tomorrow. Um, and I am aware, back to the mortality question, that if you don't keep yourself in some decent shape, it gets harder and harder to get back to it.
mm,
So, shape, that is. So, I go out and walk up for an hour every day. I used to run, but I don't have the energy to run anymore. Partly because of COVID, partly because of age, and partly because of time, and maybe health. So, I do get out every day and get exercise because I know, well, COVID affected my lungs, and then they say you have scarring in your lungs and you never recover from that. And I don't believe that, though it may be true. But I certainly need to exercise my lungs
yeah.
and my heart. And my father died of heart disease at 86. And I figure I may do that too if I'm not careful, because there's a genetic component to
Yeah.
that. Um, and I mean, I weigh too much now at 190, I think. But it's hard to know for sure because I don't eat a lot. But your body does what it does. And you can't be too critical of it. You have to be in alliance. You may not get what you want. But as a youth, I was fit and athletic and muscular. And okay, enough of that. I'm not 24 anymore. So,
Right.
I'm not going to worry about it. So staying in shape is important. And having these projects is important. And getting a lot of sleep is important. And I
Mm,
don't get enough sleep. But I do say, as a life hack, I would say this: always sleep whenever you have the opportunity. Sleep is not wasted time. Sleep is recovering time.
yeah.
And I mean, doing nothing might be wasted time. But if I have nothing to do, I'll go to sleep.
Mm,
And then I'll have dreams. And then there's this question of, what do you make of your dreams? Are they lucid dreams? Are they important dreams? And I try to make them important. And I try to make them semi-lucid. And I try to make them positive because they will make me feel really good when they're positive. But sometimes that's not what's on the agenda. So I have to take what's what's served.
Do you write down your dreams after you wake up or anything like that? Some people keep like a dream
If they're
journal
big
or
enough.
yeah.
If they're big enough. I don't necessarily feel I have to. But if they're complicated and useful, I will.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same. Like I dream all the time. I wake up and I have bizarre dreams, I have good dreams, I have bad dreams, I have terrifying dreams, I have beautiful dreams. Like I never know when I'm going to wake up and remember. But sometimes I'll
Mhm.
wake up and I'll go, that was a wild fucking ride. And I just have to write it down. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
I'll go back later the next time I have a wild dream and I'll read the previous wild one. And I'm like, yeah, that one was weird. But I don't write all of them down. I mean, I would spend so much time, I think, writing them down. It would just be another, we were talking earlier about
Well,
not having time.
let's
But
talk about dreams for a moment. This book I'm writing on dreams takes the approach that dreams don't have a message.
mm,
They have all messages. They
yeah,
don't have one message. They have many messages. In fact, they are an exploration of alternatives.
mm,
And in every way, you can take them in another direction. So a dream is typically a series of vignettes or cameos or situations or scenes.
yeah,
In every scene, they're kind of disconnected to begin with. Every scene could be reconnected and extended in its own way.
mm,
So we'll often do that. So this character turned into that character, but what if it could turn into this character? And so what if it's just a suggestion? And that now that I've woken up, I can sort of close my eyes and imagine where would it go?
Yeah.
Where else could it go? And I could say that to every scene in the dream. And I had a dream a few nights ago. I was bicycling along a coastline, and I was looking at these big trees, and they were falling into the ocean as the land sort of collapsed into the sea. And then I came to this huge warehouse, like those warehouses where they build spaceships, like 20 stories tall, but completely empty inside. And my road went into this building, and there was a roadblock, and I was on my bicycle, and they stopped me, and I said I wanted to go on, and I went into this big shed warehouse, and there were more of these trees, big trees falling down, collapsing, breaking off. And I was riding my bicycle hoping they wouldn't fall on me. And then I found myself in a kind of little corridor riding my bicycle over children's paintings, like finger paintings that were laid on the floor. And then I wanted to get out of here. And I found a door and it was locked. And I found a second door and it was still locked, riding my bicycle through corridors. And then I found a third kind of garage door and it was open. And I rode out into the daylight and woke up. And so I would say, yeah, I mean, each one of those scenes, the roadblock, the children's paintings, the big trees, the coastline, where do those go? Where could they go? What might they mean? But not what sense can I make out of them? What nonsense can I make out of them? How can I see them as confusing rather than clarifying?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that's easier because now there's not like one answer and I'm trying to find it. Anything's an answer.
Yeah.
Anything that comes up. And if you're in a good mood, think of nice things, like nice beach scenes or whatever, nice people. Anyway, how did we get to that?
Oh, we were just talking about life hacks and dreaming, and I asked about dream
Oh yeah,
journals.
life hacks, right? Dream.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely I don't necessarily try to find meaning in my dreams, but sometimes I wake up and I'm just like, I don't know, I think I should write that one down. Not for any reason necessarily. Although sometimes it's to get it out of my head. To just be like, I don't want to think about this anymore. I'm going to write it down so I don't have to think about it anymore. Which then backfires later because then I go back and read them. Next time I record a dream, I'll go back and read the last few and like, oh, now you're thinking about it.
I had a great client dreamer who had this repetitive nightmare of being attacked and stabbed by some shadowy figure in their bed. And I said to him, go back to this hypnotic regression back to your dream. And then I asked, like, see the figure, see the knife, feel frightened, feel trapped, and then have this figure reach out to you with their other hand and open their hand and show you what's in their hand. And they did that. And they said there was a diamond, a gem in their hand.
Interesting.
And I thought, well, that's the end of that nightmare. We've completely reframed that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even need to go any further. It's like, you can ask yourself, what does it mean for a character to be a mortal threat on one hand, literally, and an invitation to whatever, the divine, value, wealth on the other hand. So now you figure it out. If there's anything to figure out.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not to be figured out. Maybe it's just to be cogitated on and invited, So now develop that figure. Who is that figure? Who could it be? Who do you want it to be? Who don't you want it to be? You are the author.
Yeah.
You don't like the script? Write a new one. Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that's kind of a hack.
Yeah.
But hack is kind of diminutive. I mean, these are big things.
Right.
So it's a big hack.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a life-changing hack.
Mm-hmm. I definitely have dreams that I can't control also. Like I've got several that are related to things that happened to me in life that'll come up and It's unfortunate that they come up in my dreams, but it's just because I haven't, I don't know, worked all the way through some stuff. But
What is it? Do you have a typical theme that comes up? I
oh,
do. Maybe you
I
do.
mean, abuse most of the time. It's about that. Yeah.
Emotional abuse.
Uh,
Emotional abuse.
both. Yeah.
Well, interesting. I wonder what could you do with that. Well, what's mine? Mine is uh the losing control, the going down the mountain road and finding your brakes don't work or your
Oh, I've had
steering
that
doesn't
one. I've
work.
had that
Yeah,
one a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's one for sure.
It's not unusual. I
Or
mean,
like
another
trying to
one which
press on the brakes and it's just like nothing's
yeah,
happening when you're
that's
trying to
right,
press.
right.
Yeah.
And another common one is being naked or being exposed in public. That's very common actually, and
Mm-hmm.
I had that recently, just the other day. In fact, it's like I almost find it funny because it usually comes in a situation where you almost are empowered, and then you find you're naked.
Ah.
So it's like, what are we, you know? And my desire is like, okay, now I'm going to be proud and naked. I'm not going to cover myself. I'm going to like go out naked,
Uh-huh.
and I don't know,
See what happens.
but yeah, what's
Yeah. All right. Well, our last question of the stream is called the magic moment. And so, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and eliminate one common opinion, misconception, or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be?
well, there's two parts of that question. What do other people think, and what might you think, or
Mm.
you being the person I'm talking to? So I don't really care what other people think. It's just not my thing. I'm dealing with a person, and I'm dealing with what they think. And so the question is twofold now. If you think you have a mental illness or you think you're disabled in some way, I would ask you to reconsider. And so, like, I have a schizophrenic client who kept finding himself, in police custody.
Mm.
And I said, well, I think you're a very sensitive person who overreacts. And because you're a big guy, you threaten people and they have you arrested. And you're missing some pieces to this. You're not appreciating how sensitive you are, and you're not appreciating how powerful you are. So I would take those things as your powers to master. And I don't think it's too hard for you to master them. I mean, maybe you're having trouble with it, but maybe it's partly because nobody's telling you,
Mm-hmm.
nobody's helping you. So, we would talk about situations where you're getting triggered. So, like, why are you triggered? How are you reacting? How are you being seen? And what I'm trying to say is what you think of as your disability could be really an imbalance, part of which is a power, and another part of which is an uh, out of control power or an unguided or properly used, right? Um, Another schizophrenic client felt that they foresaw the future and influenced the future with their mind, like they would watch TV programs and make the plot happen.
Mm.
And I said, well, that's pretty weird. Um, but how can we turn that into something useful? Like, what are you actually tapping into there that might be useful? I mean, I don't really believe it, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's deeper levels to understand this at, like insight into culture, and maybe you're seeing where things are going to go, and maybe you'd be a great detective. I mean, I'm not going to debase it to that level, but maybe you have great insight into how things develop,
Mm-hmm.
and you're seeing it as if you're scripting the narrative. And I'm saying, well, the truth is, all these narratives are alike anyhow. and you're just picking up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, maybe you are writing it, but not directly, but culturally, you're picking up on the drift.
Yeah.
So I would rewrite it that way. And then the other part of the answer is I would take the point of view that perhaps what you think is sane is not.
Mm.
So when you're continually frustrated by a certain thing or finding yourself frequently obstructed by something, maybe you're a little crazy. Maybe you're overreacting or failing to react or are insensitive or somehow missing intolerant. So people get angry, they get frustrated, they get anxious. Um, they'll blame other people. They'll blame the situation, work, their kids. And I'll say, well, all right, if you're disabled, I'll suggest that perhaps you're abled. If
Mm.
you tell me you're disabled, I'm going to suggest perhaps you're actually working with an ability you don't know how to use. But if you're saying that you're enabled and you're being held back by all these annoying people, then I'm going to say maybe you're not so enabled. Maybe you're overlooking a disability, which is getting the best of you,
Mm.
making you anxious, making you frustrated. Like my banker client who's moving into fatherhood. Okay, yeah, you've been a great banker, but being a father is going to be something new. And he's always been at the top of his game, and he's always been pretty frustrated with everyone else because they're not as high achiever as he is. And that's not going to work out too well in the family,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
That's going to be a
so
shock.
maybe this is not the skill that you want to apply. And maybe we should think about it now
Mm-hmm.
before it becomes a problem. So I don't know what you want to say. Maybe that's demoting him. Uh, but I mean, I'll say it with a certain empathy. It's like, yeah, you want a family. Don't keep doing that.
Yeah.
Because you don't, you can't fuck up kids.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I have very little sympathy for is abusing. And you might not even call it abuse. Usually they'll justify,
Right.
I locked him in his room because he wasn't doing his homework. Well, no, that's not acceptable. Sorry,
Yeah.
Um,
So just kind of choosing the skills you're deploying when and where and picking the right ones for the right job.
and being sensitive and being, looking,
Yeah.
it's like, where's your attitude coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you learn this attitude? Or where did this problem originate?
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh, so, you're saying, what would I do if I had a magic wand? I would just explore those things.
Yeah.
I would it's called reframing
Mm-hmm.
in sort of technical jargon. I'm always looking to reframe. So I don't know, you got to be careful with magic wands, right? It's a traditional story of, the sorcerer's apprentice. You got to be careful. So I very much like one of my favorite books was the Once and Future King, the particular part about the young Arthur being tutored by Merlin
Mm.
in the E.B. White version of the book, where he turns him into an ant to see what ants think, and he turns him into a fish to see how fish think. I don't know what else he turned him. I just think it was just an ant with a fish. But the whole lessons of life, not being taught as a magic wand waved at him, but being offered as an opportunity to experience. I mean, so if I had a magic wand, I would turn you into an ant and let you experience anthood. And there's a lot of things people do that are very insect-like.
Mm-hmm.
War being one of them. It's certainly not a very sane and humane behavior. uh, and not very many animals do it. Insects do,
Yeah.
right? Wasps and ants, but mammals, not like people.
Hmm.
We are fucked up in a particular way
That's the
that
truth.
needs something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to post your socials for everyone. If they want to connect with you, I'm going to go ahead and post those again. And while I'm doing that, just Lincoln, if there's anything that we haven't covered, feel free to promote anything that you're working on or, anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and get these posted for you.
Oh, well, I kind of always end on the same note, which is that everybody should work on themselves.
Mm.
And that, I often get people asking me the price. That's very interesting. What is the price of working on yourself? I can't answer that. But
Mm.
the usual drift is that you have to work at value. What's the value of working on yourself? And yeah, I charge money, and most likely you'll find somebody else with value will charge money. Except if you, well, you could go travel to Tibet and, find some wise person, but they're going to charge money too. And it's going to cost a
And you
lot of
got
money to
travel
get to
costs.
Tibet.
Yeah, you got to get there.
That's, and the time it takes.
Hmm.
So, even if you choose to go to Cancun and spend your 2 weeks on the beach, that's not free either.
Hmm.
Um, but it's worth investing in whatever, not just you think moves you forward, but what you think has been given to you, or the obligations given to you, often through trauma, right?
Hmm.
Trauma of your past. So, okay, if you learn how to overcome something that's important, then everybody around you will eventually pick up on it. And I think that's an obligation. And I'm
Yeah,
not even sure how you value that, but it's probably the most valuable thing that I
hmm,
can think of.
for sure.
So that's what I encourage people to do.
I like that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out today to talk to us. Uh,
Sure.
Folks who are here with us, give me just a minute. I'm going to disconnect with Lincoln and I will be right back. So stick around. But Lincoln, again, thank you just for taking the time out of your evening.
Thank you very much, too.